The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the thick snow that seemed to come from every direction at once. Maya pulled her old pickup truck to the side of the mountain road and took a deep breath. The storm had come out of nowhere, turning what should have been a simple drive home into something dangerous. She had been working as a veterinarian in the small mountain town of Pine Ridge for 3 years now. Today's emergency call had taken her to the Henderson Ranch, where their prize bull had gotten himself tangled up in old fence wire. It had been a tough job, but she had managed to patch him up and get him back on his feet. The Hendersons couldn't pay much, but they always made sure she left with fresh eggs and homemade bread. Maya loved her work, even if it didn't make her rich. Every day brought something new. Sometimes it was a sick dog, sometimes a horse with a hurt leg, and sometimes it was wildlife that people brought in after finding them injured on the roadside. The pay wasn't great, but she couldn't imagine doing anything else. Now sitting in her truck as snow piled up on the road, she wondered if she should have left the ranch earlier. The weather forecast had mentioned possible snow, but nothing like this. The wind was howling so loud she could barely hear herself think, and the snow was coming down so thick she could hardly see 10 feet ahead. She was about to put the truck in reverse and try to find somewhere to wait out the storm when her headlights caught something that made her heart jump. Through the swirling snow, she could see what looked like a person stumbling along the side of the road. Next to them was the dark shape of a car partially buried in snow. Maya didn't even think twice. She grabbed her emergency medical kit from behind the seat and pulled on her heaviest coat. The wind hit her like a wall when she opened the door, nearly knocking her over. The cold was so intense it took her breath away, but she pushed forward through the knee-deep snow. As she got closer, she could see it was a man in what looked like an expensive business suit. He was walking in circles, clearly confused and disoriented. His dark hair was covered with snow, and his face was red from the cold. He didn't even seem to notice her approaching until she was right next to him. "Sir, are you okay?" Maya had to shout over the wind. The man looked at her with unfocused eyes. She recognized the signs immediately. He was showing the early stages of hypothermia, and if she didn't get him warm soon, things could get very bad very quickly. "My car, it just stopped," he mumbled, his words slurred from the cold. "I called for help. They're coming." Maya looked at his car, a sleek black sedan that was clearly expensive but completely useless in this weather. The snow had already covered most of it, and she could see that one of the tires was flat. Even if help was coming, which she doubted in this storm, they wouldn't make it in time. "We need to get you warmed up," she said, taking his arm. "My truck has heat." He tried to protest, saying something about not wanting to be any trouble, but Maya wasn't having it. She had seen what hypothermia could do to people, and this man was already in danger. She half guided, half carried him through the snow to her truck. Once inside, she cranked up the heat and wrapped him in the emergency blankets she always kept in her vehicle. She had learned long ago that in mountain country, you never knew when you might need them. "Today that preparation might save a life. What's your name?" she asked as she poured hot coffee from her thermos into the cap and handed it to him. "David," he said, his hands shaking as he tried to hold the cup. "David Chen. I'm Maya Rodriguez. I'm a veterinarian here in town." David nodded, still shivering despite the blankets and heat. Maya studied his face as he slowly warmed up. He looked to be in his early 40s with kind eyes and a face that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. His suit was well-made and expensive, and his watch looked like it cost more than Maya made in 6 months. Clearly he wasn't from around here. "Thank you," he said after a few minutes, his voice stronger now. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." "What were you doing out here in this weather?" Maya asked. "This road doesn't really lead anywhere except ranch country." David was quiet for a moment. I was driving. Just driving. I needed to think, and I like mountain roads. They're peaceful." He looked embarrassed. "I guess I wasn't paying attention to the weather forecast." Maya understood that feeling. Sometimes when life got complicated, a long drive through the mountains was the best medicine, but she also knew how dangerous these roads could be, especially for someone who wasn't familiar with mountain weather. "Well, you're safe now," she said, "but I don't think we're going anywhere for a while." Through the windshield, they could see that the snow was falling even harder now. The wind was rocking the truck, and the road had completely disappeared under a blanket of white. Maya had lived in the mountains long enough to know that this was going to be a long night. David seemed to be thinking the same thing. "I'm sorry I've gotten you stuck out here because of my stupidity." Don't worry about it, Maya said with a smile. I've been in worse situations. Besides, it's not like either of us had much choice in the matter. As they sat there, Maya found herself curious about her unexpected companion. David seemed educated and well-spoken, but there was something about him that suggested he wasn't used to being in situations where he couldn't control what happened next. Most wealthy people she had met were used to solving problems by throwing money at them, but money couldn't stop a blizzard. "So what do you do for work?" she asked, more to pass the time than anything else. "I run a company," David said vaguely. "Technology stuff. It's not very interesting." Maya had a feeling there was more to the story, but she didn't press. People had their reasons for being private, and she respected that. Instead, she told him about her work as a veterinarian, sharing some of the funnier stories about animals she had treated over the years. David seemed genuinely interested, asking questions about her work and laughing at her stories. She told him about the time she had to remove a sock from a golden retriever's stomach, and about the cat that had somehow gotten its head stuck in a peanut butter jar. David's whole face lit up when he laughed, and Maya found herself enjoying his company more than she had expected. As the storm continued to rage outside, they talked about all sorts of things. David asked about life in a small mountain town, and Maya found herself sharing more than she usually did with strangers. She told him about how she had grown up in the city, but fell in love with mountain country during a college internship. She talked about the challenges of running a small veterinary practice, how sometimes people couldn't afford to pay for their pets' care, and how she often ended up treating animals for free. "That must be hard financially," David said. Maya shrugged. "I didn't become a vet to get rich. I became a vet because I love animals and I want to help them. The money? Well, I make enough to get by. That's what matters." David was quiet for a long time after that. Maya got the impression that her perspective was very different from what he was used to in his own life. The hours passed, and despite the circumstances, Maya found herself enjoying the conversation. David was intelligent and thoughtful, and he seemed genuinely interested in her stories about small-town life. He asked about her dreams and goals, and when she mentioned her hope of someday opening an animal sanctuary for injured wildlife, he listened with the kind of attention that made her feel like her dreams actually mattered. "What about you?" she asked eventually. "What are your dreams?" David was quiet for so long that Maya wondered if he had fallen asleep. But then he spoke, his voice softer than it had been all evening. "I used to think I knew," he said. "Success, money, building something that would last. But lately I'm not sure any of that was what I really wanted." There was something in his voice that made Maya look at him more closely. Despite his expensive clothes and confident demeanor, there was a sadness in his eyes that she hadn't noticed before. "What changed your mind?" she asked gently. David stared out at the swirling snow for a long time before answering. "I have a daughter," he said finally. "Lily, she's 16 and she doesn't really want anything to do with me anymore. She says I care more about my work than I do about her." Maya could hear the pain in his voice. "Do you think she's right?" "I don't know," David admitted. "Maybe. I thought I was working hard for her to give her a good life. But somewhere along the way, I think I forgot that the most important thing I could give her was my time." They talked until the early hours of the morning, sharing stories and thoughts they probably wouldn't have shared under normal circumstances. There was something about being trapped together in the storm that made usual social barriers seem unimportant. Maya learned that David was divorced, and that his relationship with his daughter had been strained for years. David learned that Maya had grown up in a large, close-knit family, and that her decision to move to the mountains had been partly about finding her own path, away from family expectations. As dawn began to break through the storm clouds, they could see that the worst of the weather had passed. The snow was still falling, but gently now, and the wind had died down to a whisper. "I should probably try to call for help now," David said, checking his phone. He had signal again. Maya felt an unexpected. Maya watched the snow continue to fall and knew they were in trouble. The storm wasn't letting up like she had hoped. If anything, it seemed to be getting worse. The wind was picking up again, and she could feel her old truck rocking with each gust. "We can't stay here all night," she said, more to herself than to David. "The truck engine won't run forever, and we'll freeze once the heat stops." David looked concerned. "What do you suggest?" Maya thought for a moment. She knew these mountains well from her years of making house calls to remote ranches. There was an old hunting cabin about a mile up an old logging road. She had been there once with her grandfather when she was a kid, back when he used to hunt these mountains every fall. "There's a cabin not far from here," she said. "It's been abandoned for years, but it should still have a roof and walls. More importantly, it has a wood stove." David looked out at the swirling snow with obvious concern. "A mile in this weather?" "It's better than freezing to death in the truck," Maya said practically. "Besides, I've got snowshoes in the back. We can make it." She could see David weighing their options. He was clearly not the outdoorsy type, but he was smart enough to understand their situation. They couldn't stay in the truck all night, and no rescue vehicles were getting through this storm. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's do it." Maya gathered her emergency supplies while David tried to prepare for the hike as best he could. She gave him an extra pair of heavy socks and some waterproof gloves she kept in her emergency kit. His business shoes were going to be a problem, but there wasn't much they could do about that. The walk to the cabin was brutal. Even with snowshoes, they sank deep into the fresh snow with every step. The wind cut through their clothes like knives, and David struggled to keep up. Maya had to stop several times to make sure he was still with her. His expensive suit offered little protection against the mountain cold, and she could see him shivering violently. Just a little further, she encouraged him as they pushed through a particularly deep drift. "I can see the roofline through the trees." David nodded, too out of breath to speak. Maya admired his determination. A lot of people would have given up by now, but he kept pushing forward despite being obviously miserable. The cabin was exactly as Maya remembered it, though it looked smaller and more run down than it had in her childhood memories. The front door was unlocked, and they stumbled inside, grateful to be out of the wind. The interior was basic but dry. There was a small main room with the wood stove Maya had remembered, a tiny kitchen area, and what looked like a bedroom off to one side. Dust covers protected old furniture, and there were cobwebs in the corners. But it was clean and functional. Most importantly, there was a stack of seasoned firewood next to the stove and a pile of old newspapers for kindling. "Let me get a fire started," Maya said, immediately getting to work. She had learned to build fires as a child during camping trips with her family, and the skill came back to her naturally. David watched her work with obvious admiration. "You really know what you're doing," he said. "My dad made sure all his kids could take care of themselves in the outdoors," Maya replied, as she arranged kindling in the stove. "He said you never know when those skills might save your life." Within minutes, she had a small fire crackling in the stove. The warmth felt incredible after their cold journey through the snow. David moved closer to the stove, holding his hands out toward the flames. "Better?" Maya asked. "Much better, thank you." "Again." David looked around the cabin with curiosity. "How did you know about this place?" "My grandfather brought me here when I was about 10, Maya said, settling into an old chair near the stove. "He used to hunt these mountains every fall. This was his favorite cabin to stay in." "Does your family still hunt here?" Maya shook her head. "Grandpa passed away when I was in high school, and nobody else in the family was really interested in hunting. I haven't been back here since then, actually. I wasn't even sure it would still be standing." As the fire grew stronger and the cabin warmed up, they both began to relax. Maya found some old blankets in a chest and shook them out. They smelled musty but were clean and dry. "So tell me more about your work," David said as they settled in for what was clearly going to be a long night. "What made you decide to become a veterinarian?" Maya smiled. "I've always loved animals ever since I was little. My mom used to joke that I brought home every stray cat and hurt bird I could find. When I was 8, our dog got hit by a car, and the vet who treated him was so kind and gentle. I decided right then that I wanted to do the same thing." "That's beautiful," David said. "It must be rewarding work." "It is most of the time, though it can be heartbreaking too. Sometimes there's nothing you can do, and you have to watch an animal suffer. And then there are the financial realities." Maya found herself opening up more than she usually did with strangers. Maybe it was the isolation of being trapped together, or maybe there was just something about David that made her feel comfortable sharing. "What do you mean by financial realities?" David asked. "Well, running a veterinary practice in a small town isn't exactly a path to riches," Maya explained. "A lot of my clients are ranchers and farmers who are struggling financially themselves. Sometimes they can't afford proper treatment for their animals, and I end up working for free or bartering for services. That must be difficult for you financially." Maya shrugged. "I make enough to get by. I have a small apartment above my clinic. I drive an old truck that runs reliably and I don't need much else. But sometimes I dream of doing more. What kind of more? I'd love to open a wildlife rehabilitation center, Maya said, her eyes lighting up. Somewhere we could care for injured wild animals and release them back into their natural habitat. There's such a need for that kind of facility in this area, but it would take a lot of money to set up properly. David listened intently as she described her vision. She talked about the kinds of animals they could help, the facilities they would need, and the educational programs they could offer to local schools. Her passion for the project was obvious, and David found himself drawn into her enthusiasm. "It sounds like you've thought this through carefully," he said. "I have. I've even written up a business plan, though I've never shown it to anyone. It's probably just a pipe dream." "Why do you say that?" Maya looked into the fire. "Because dreams like that require money, and money is something I don't have much of. The startup costs alone would be enormous." They talked long into the night, with the conversation moving from topic to topic naturally. Maya told David about life in Pine Ridge, about the characters who live there and the challenges of small-town life. She talked about her patients, from beloved family pets to valuable livestock. David shared more about his own life too, though he remained vague about the specifics of his work. He talked about his daughter Lily and how their relationship had deteriorated over the years. His voice grew sad when he described how she had started pulling away from him when she was around 12. "She used to love spending time with me," he said. "We would go hiking, build things together, read books. But then something changed. She started seeing me as just the guy who was always working, always traveling, always too busy for her." "Did you try to change that?" Maya asked gently. "I thought I was working for her," David said, "to give her opportunities, to make sure she would never want for anything. But I think what she really wanted was just for me to be present." Maya could hear the regret in his voice. "It's not too late, you know. She's only 16. There's still time to rebuild your relationship with her." "I hope so," David said quietly. "I really hope so." As the night wore on, Maya found herself studying David's face in the firelight. There was something about him that intrigued her. He was obviously successful and wealthy, but he didn't have the arrogance she had come to expect from rich people. Instead, he seemed almost lost, like someone who had achieved everything he thought he wanted only to discover it wasn't what he needed. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said eventually. "Of course. You said you were just driving tonight, that you needed to think. What were you thinking about?" David was quiet for so long that Maya wondered if she had overstepped. But then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about whether I've wasted my life," he said. "Whether all the things I thought were important actually matter at all." "What brought that on?" "A lot of things. My daughter, mostly. But also, I look around at my life and I realize I don't have any real friends. I have business associates and employees and people who want things from me. But I don't have anyone I can actually talk to. Anyone who cares about me as a person rather than what I can do for them." Maya felt a pang of sympathy for this man who seemed to have everything but felt so alone. "That sounds incredibly lonely." "It is," David admitted. "I've built this successful company. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I live in a beautiful house, and I'm miserable." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire crackle and listening to the wind outside. Maya found herself thinking about the strange turn her evening had taken. A few hours ago, she had been driving home from a routine veterinary call. Now she was sharing her deepest thoughts with a complete stranger in an abandoned cabin. The sound of helicopters broke the peaceful morning silence like thunder. Maya and David both looked up from their quiet breakfast of energy bars and water from Maya's emergency supplies. The steady thrum of rotor blades was getting closer, and they could hear voices calling out through megaphones. "Search and rescue," David said with a mixture of relief and something that might have been disappointment. Maya felt the same conflicted emotions. She was glad they were going to be rescued, of course, but she wasn't ready for their strange and wonderful night to end. They had shared something special in this little cabin, something that felt important in a way she couldn't quite explain. "I guess we should get ready," she said, starting to pack up her emergency supplies. David nodded and began folding the blankets they had used. As they worked, both of them seemed reluctant to talk about what would happen once they were rescued. It felt like acknowledging the end of something beautiful. The helicopters circled overhead for several minutes before landing in a clearing not far from the cabin. Maya and David could hear people approaching through the snow, their voices getting closer. Mr. Chen, Mr. Chen, are you in there? David looked surprised at being addressed so formally. Maya noticed that the searchers seemed to know exactly who they were looking for, which struck her as odd for a random stranded motorist. Yes, I'm here, David called out. We're both safe. The door to the cabin opened and 3 men in heavy winter gear entered. Maya immediately noticed their professional equipment and the way they carried themselves. These weren't just local search and rescue volunteers. They moved like military or high-end private security. Mr. Chen, thank God you're all right, said the first man who appeared to be in charge. When your car was found abandoned, we feared the worst. I'm fine, thanks to this lady, David said, gesturing to Maya. Maya Rodriguez. She saved my life. The lead searcher nodded politely to Maya but seemed focused primarily on David. Sir, we have a helicopter standing by to take you directly to the medical facility in Denver. We need to get you checked out immediately. That's not necessary, David said. I'm feeling fine. With respect, sir, it's protocol after a hypothermia incident. Maya was beginning to get a clearer picture of the situation. The level of response, the professional searchers, the insistence on medical protocols. This wasn't the kind of treatment a random stranded motorist would receive. David was clearly someone important, though she still wasn't sure exactly who. As they prepared to leave the cabin, one of the searchers handed David a phone. Your assistant has been trying to reach you, sir. She says it's urgent. David took the phone reluctantly. Maya could only hear his side of the conversation, but it was clearly about business matters that couldn't wait. As he talked, his whole demeanor changed. The relaxed, vulnerable man she had spent the night talking with was replaced by someone more formal and distant. Yes, I understand the Shanghai deal is time-sensitive, he said into the phone. Schedule the conference call for this afternoon. I'll be back in the office by then. Maya felt a pang of something like loss as she watched the transformation. The David she had come to know over the past 12 hours was disappearing before her eyes, replaced by what she assumed was his normal professional self. When he finished the call, David seemed to notice the change in Maya's expression. I'm sorry about that, he said quietly. Work doesn't stop even for blizzards. I understand, Maya said, though she felt oddly disappointed. The walk back to the helicopter was awkward. David tried to help Maya through the deep snow, but the searchers kept urging him to move faster. Maya got the distinct impression that she was now seen as an obstacle to their efficient evacuation of their VIP. When they reached the helicopter, Maya got her first real surprise of the morning. It wasn't a simple rescue helicopter. It was a sleek, expensive-looking aircraft that screamed corporate money. The pilot was wearing a professional uniform, and the interior looked more like a luxury car than emergency rescue equipment. This is quite a helicopter, Maya said as they climbed aboard. David looked embarrassed. My company maintains a fleet for emergency situations. What kind of company requires a fleet of helicopters? Maya asked, though she was beginning to suspect she knew the answer. Before David could respond, one of the searchers addressed him again. Mr. Chen, your security team is concerned about media attention. They've prepared a statement about the incident that avoids any specific details. Maya's eyebrows went up. Media attention? Security teams? Just who exactly was David Chen? As if reading her thoughts, David pulled out his wallet and handed her a business card. Maya looked at it and felt her heart skip a beat. David Chen, Chief Executive Officer, Green Tech Solutions. Maya stared at the card. She had heard of Green Tech Solutions, of course. Everyone had. It was one of the largest renewable energy companies in the world, worth billions of dollars. David wasn't just wealthy. He was one of the most powerful business leaders in the country. She looked up at him with new eyes. The man sitting across from her in the helicopter wasn't just David, the lost and lonely person she had connected with in the cabin. He was David Chen, billionaire CEO, one of the most influential people in the tech industry. You're him, she said quietly. You're actually him. David saw the change in her expression and felt his heart sink. This was always the moment he dreaded, when people discovered who he really was and everything changed. The easy connection they had shared was about to be replaced by the awkwardness that came with his wealth and fame. I'm still just David, he said, but even as he said it, he could see in Maya's eyes that something had shifted. Maya was trying to process this new information. The man she had spent the night talking with, sharing her dreams and fears with, was one of the richest people in America. She felt suddenly embarrassed about her old truck, her small veterinary practice, her simple dreams of opening a wildlife center. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Because I liked being just David for a while," he said honestly. "I liked having someone talk to me like I was a regular person instead of a balance sheet." The helicopter began its descent toward a landing pad at a medical facility in Denver. Through the windows, Maya could see news vans already gathering, their satellite dishes pointing skyward like mechanical flowers. "The media is already here," one of the security team members said to David. "We'll get you inside." Through the service entrance, David nodded. But Maya could see he was uncomfortable with all the attention. "This is what your life is always like?" she asked. "More or less," David admitted. "Privacy is a luxury I gave up a long time ago." As they landed, Maya suddenly felt very out of place. She was about to step into David's world, and she wasn't sure she belonged there. Her practical outdoor clothes and work boots seemed ridiculously inappropriate for the sleek, professional environment that surrounded David. "Maya," David said as they prepared to get off the helicopter, "I want you to know that last night meant something to me. It was real, regardless of all this other stuff." Maya wanted to believe him, but she was struggling with the reality of their situation. They came from completely different worlds. What had felt like a genuine connection in the isolation of the cabin now seemed like something that couldn't possibly survive in the real world. "I know," she said, but her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. The medical facility was a blur of professional efficiency. Maya was checked out quickly and declared to be in perfect health, while David was whisked away for more comprehensive tests. She found herself sitting in a comfortable waiting room, feeling completely out of place among the expensive artwork and designer furniture. A well-dressed woman approached her with a clipboard. "Ms. Rodriguez? I'm Jennifer Park, Mr. Chen's assistant. Mr. Chen wanted me to arrange transportation back to your vehicle and to cover any expenses related to your rescue efforts." Maya felt a flash of irritation. After the night they had shared, she was being handled by an assistant like a business transaction. "That's not necessary," Maya said stiffly. "Mr. Chen insisted," Jennifer continued professionally. "He also wanted me to give you this." She handed Maya an envelope. Inside was a check for an amount that made Maya's eyes widen. It was more money than her veterinary practice made in 6 months. Maya felt a mixture of gratitude and offense. The check was generous, incredibly so, but it also felt like payment for services rendered. It reduced their night together to a transaction, and that hurt more than she expected. "Please tell Mr. Chen thank you." "But I can't accept this," Maya said, handing the check back. Jennifer looked surprised. "I'm sure Mr. Chen would want you to reconsider. He's very grateful for what you did." "I didn't help him for money," Maya said firmly. "I helped him because it was the right thing to do." Before Jennifer could respond, David appeared in the doorway. He had been cleaned up and was wearing fresh clothes that someone had brought for him. He looked like the successful CEO from the business magazines now, all traces of the vulnerable man from the cabin gone. "Maya," he said, approaching carefully, "I heard you won't accept the check." "I don't need payment for helping someone in trouble," Maya said, standing up. "That's not who I am. I know that. That's not what the check was for. I thought maybe it could help with your wildlife center dream." 3 weeks had passed since the storm, and Maya was doing her best to get back to normal life. She threw herself into her work with renewed energy, treating everything from sick cattle to injured raccoons. She told herself that the night in the cabin had been a beautiful but temporary experience, something to remember fondly but not to dwell on. Still, she found herself thinking about David more often than she cared to admit. She wondered if he had made progress with his daughter, if he had found a way to reconnect with the person he used to be. Sometimes she caught herself looking at news articles about green tech solutions, searching for any mention of David Chen. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed again. Maya was in her clinic examining a border collie with a hurt paw when she heard the front door chime. Her receptionist, Mrs. Patterson, called out that someone was there to see her. "Tell them I'll be right out," Maya called back, finishing up the bandage on the dog's paw. "Mr. Riley, keep this dry for the next few days, and if the swelling doesn't go down, bring him back in." She walked out to the front office, expecting to see another local farmer with a sick animal. Instead, she found David Chen standing by the reception desk, looking decidedly out of place in his designer jeans and expensive jacket. Maya stopped short, her heart skipping a beat. "David, what are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood," he said with a slight smile. "I thought I'd stop by and see how you were doing." Maya was acutely aware of Mrs. Patterson listening to every word of their conversation. The elderly receptionist had worked in Pine Ridge for 40 years and knew everyone's business. By tomorrow, half the town would know that Maya had a mysterious visitor who looked like he stepped out of a magazine. "How did you find me?" Maya asked. "Pine Ridge isn't that big," David said. "There's only one veterinarian in town." He was right about that. Maya looked around her small clinic with new eyes, seeing it as David must see it. The worn linoleum floors, the mismatched furniture, the hand-painted signs she had made herself. It all looked so humble compared to the luxury she had glimpsed in his world. "Would you like a tour?" she offered, not sure what else to say. David nodded eagerly. "I'd love to see where you work." Maya showed him around the clinic, explaining the equipment and the different treatment rooms. David asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested in everything she showed him. When they got to the surgery room, he studied the setup with fascination. "This is where you operate?" he asked. "On smaller animals, yes. For larger surgeries on horses or cattle, I usually go to them." "It's impressive," David said. "You've built something really meaningful here." Maya felt a glow of pride. Her clinic might not be fancy, but it was hers, and she had worked hard to build it from nothing. They were interrupted by a commotion in the waiting room. Maya hurried out to find the Johnson family with their golden retriever Max. The dog was whimpering and couldn't put weight on his back leg. "What happened?" Maya asked, immediately switching into professional mode. "He got hit by a car about an hour ago," Mr. Johnson said, his voice shaking. "We brought him as fast as we could." Maya quickly examined Max and determined that he had a broken leg that would require surgery to repair properly. The Johnsons were a young family who had moved to Pine Ridge the year before when Mr. Johnson lost his job in Denver. Maya knew they were struggling financially. "How much will it cost?" Mrs. Johnson asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya quoted them the price for the surgery and she saw their faces fall. She knew they couldn't afford it, just like so many of her clients. "We'll find the money somehow," Mr. Johnson said desperately. "Max is part of our family. Our kids would be devastated if something happened to him." Maya was about to offer her usual payment plan when David stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said to Mrs. Patterson. "I'd like to cover the cost of Max's surgery." The Johnsons stared at him in surprise. "Sir, we couldn't possibly accept that," Mrs. Johnson said. "Please," David said gently. "I can see how much you love Max, and every family deserves to have their pets healthy and safe." Maya watched in amazement as David quietly arranged with Mrs. Patterson to pay for Max's surgery. He did it without fanfare, without making the Johnsons feel like they were receiving charity. He simply made it possible for them to get their dog the care he needed. After the Johnsons left with promises that Max would be fine after his surgery, Maya turned to David with new respect. "That was incredibly kind of you," she said. David shrugged. "It was nothing. Just money." "It wasn't nothing to them," Maya said firmly. "That was their dog's life you just saved." They went to lunch at Pine Ridge's only restaurant, a small diner called Mountain View that served basic American food and the best coffee in town. Maya was nervous about being seen with David, knowing that the gossip mill would be working overtime, but she found she didn't care as much as she thought she would. Over lunch, David told her about his life since the storm. He had made some changes at work, delegating more responsibilities so he could have more personal time. He had also been trying to rebuild his relationship with his daughter Lily. "How's that going?" Maya asked. "Slowly," David admitted. "She's still pretty angry with me and I don't blame her. But we've started having dinner together once a week. Just the two of us. No phones, no work talk." "It's a start," Maya smiled. "That's wonderful." "What does she like to do?" "That's the problem," David said with a rueful laugh. "I'm not sure I really know what she likes anymore. She used to love horses when she was little, and she's always been good with animals. But we've been so distant for so long that I feel like I'm getting to know her all over again." An idea began forming in Maya's mind, but she wasn't sure if she should voice it. After a moment's hesitation, she decided to take the chance. "What if she spent some time here this summer?" Maya suggested. "I could use help around the clinic, and it might give you both a chance to see a different side of each other." David looked intrigued. "You'd be willing to do that?" "Of course. If she's interested in animals, there's no better education than hands-on experience." And Pine Ridge is a good place for a teenager to spend the summer. It's safe, and there's enough to do to keep her busy without getting into trouble. David was quiet for a long time, considering the idea. She's been so unhappy lately, he said finally. Depressed, angry, pulling away from everyone. Her mother and I don't know how to help her. Sometimes a change of scenery can make all the difference, Maya said. And working with animals has a way of putting things in perspective. They don't care about your problems or your attitude. They just need care and attention. Would you really be willing to take her on? David asked. I'd be happy to, Maya said, and she meant it. But it would have to be real work, not some kind of charity project. If she comes here, she'd be expected to pull her weight just like any other employee. David smiled for the first time since arriving. I think that's exactly what she needs. They spent the rest of lunch talking about the possibility. Maya explained what kind of work Lily would be doing, from cleaning kennels to assisting with routine examinations. David seemed excited about the prospect of his daughter having a meaningful summer job. There's just one thing, David said as they prepared to leave the restaurant. I want to pay her salary, and I want to make a donation to your clinic to cover any additional expenses. Maya started to protest, but David held up his hand. This isn't charity, he said. This is a business arrangement. You're providing a valuable service, and I want to pay fair market rate for it. Maya considered this. The money would certainly help the clinic, and it would allow her to take on Lily without worrying about the financial impact. Okay, she said finally, but the amount has to be reasonable. I won't accept anything excessive, David grinned. Define reasonable. They negotiated back and forth, with Maya insisting on a modest amount and David pushing for more. Eventually, they settled on a figure that would help the clinic without making Maya feel uncomfortable. As they walked back toward Maya's clinic, David seemed different than he had during their rescue. He was more relaxed, more like the person she had met in the cabin. The expensive clothes and corporate demeanor were still there, but underneath she could see glimpses of the man who had shared his deepest thoughts with her during the storm. Can I ask you something? Maya said as they reached her truck. Anything. Why did you really come here today? And don't say you were just in the neighborhood, because I know that's not true. David was quiet for a moment. Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about our conversation in the cabin, he said honestly. You made me remember who I used to be before success changed everything. I wanted to see if that person still existed. And what did you decide? I think he does, David said. But I'm not sure how to be him in my regular life. Maya understood that struggle. Maybe you don't have to choose between being successful and being authentic. Maybe you just have to find a way to let the authentic person drive the success instead of the other way around. David looked at her with something like wonder. How do you always know exactly what to say? I don't, Maya laughed. I just say what I think and hope for the best. As David prepared to leave, he seemed reluctant to go. Maya, he said finally, I know you said it wouldn't work between us because... Lily Chen arrived in Pine Ridge on the first Monday of June, with all the enthusiasm of someone being sent to prison. She stepped out of the black SUV that had driven her from Denver wearing designer clothes completely inappropriate for ranch work, and an expression that could have frozen water. Maya watched from her clinic window as the 16-year-old girl said goodbye to her driver with barely concealed resentment. David had called the night before to confirm the arrangements, and Maya could hear the worry in his voice. His daughter was not happy about spending the summer in what she had apparently called the middle of nowhere with the crazy animal lady. You must be Lily, Maya said, stepping outside to greet her new summer employee. I'm Maya Rodriguez. Lily looked Maya up and down with the kind of critical assessment that only teenagers could manage. So you're the one who thinks you can fix me by making me shovel animal poop all summer? Maya had to admire the girl's directness, even if her attitude needed work. Actually, I think you can fix yourself if you want to. I'm just here to give you something productive to do while you figure it out. My dad says you saved his life in a snowstorm. We helped each other, Maya corrected. That's what people do when they're in trouble. Lily rolled her eyes. Right. Well, let's get this over with. Where do I sleep? Maya showed Lily to the small apartment above the clinic that she had prepared for her. It was simple but comfortable, with a bedroom, tiny kitchen, and living area with a view of the mountains. Lily looked around with obvious disappointment. No cable TV. There's internet and a streaming service, Maya said. but you'll probably be too tired to watch much television after working all day. Great, Lily muttered. This is going to be the worst summer ever. Maya decided to jump right in rather than let Lily stew in her resentment. Come on, let me show you around the clinic and introduce you to some of the animals. The tour of the clinic did nothing to improve Lily's mood. She complained about the smell, wrinkled her nose at the sight of the kennels, and made sarcastic comments about everything from the equipment to the decor. Maya began to wonder if she had made a serious mistake in agreeing to take on David's daughter. This is where we keep animals that are recovering from surgery or need extended care, Maya explained, leading Lily into one of the recovery rooms. Wonderful, Lily said flatly. A room full of sick animals. Just what I wanted to see. But as they walked through the room, Maya noticed that despite her attitude, Lily's eyes lingered on each of the animals. When they stopped by a kennel containing a young border collie with a bandaged leg, Lily actually moved closer to get a better look. What's wrong with this one? She asked, trying to sound disinterested. That's Scout, Maya said. He was hit by a car last week. His leg was badly broken, but he's healing well now. Lily stared at the dog, who was looking back at her with curious eyes. Does it hurt? He's on pain medication, so he's comfortable. He should be ready to go home in a few days. What if his owners can't afford the medical bills? Maya was surprised by the question. It suggested that Lily was more perceptive than her sullen exterior indicated. Sometimes people can't afford proper care for their animals, Maya admitted. When that happens, we work out payment plans, or sometimes I treat animals for free. That doesn't seem like a very good business model. It's not about making money, Maya said. It's about helping animals that need care. Lily looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Everything's about money. My dad taught me that. Not everything, Maya said quietly. Some things are about doing what's right. The first week was rough. Lily approached every task with obvious reluctance, complained constantly about the early hours and physical work, and made it clear that she considered herself above cleaning kennels and feeding animals. Maya began each day wondering if Lily would quit and demand to go home. But slowly, almost despite herself, Lily began to show glimpses of genuine interest in the work. Maya noticed her spending extra time with certain animals, particularly the ones who seemed scared or lonely. When she thought no one was watching, Lily would talk softly to the dogs and cats, her voice gentle in a way that contradicted her harsh exterior. The real turning point came during Lily's third week in Pine Ridge. Maya got an emergency call about an injured wild horse that had been found tangled in barbed wire about 10 miles out of town. It was going to be a difficult rescue, requiring them to hike into rough terrain with medical supplies. I need to respond to this call, Maya told Lily. You can stay here and keep an eye on the clinic. I want to come with you, Lily said, surprising Maya. It's going to be dangerous and difficult. We'll be hiking through rough country, and there's no guarantee we can save the animal. I don't care, Lily said with the first real determination Maya had seen from her. I want to help. Against her better judgment, Maya agreed to let Lily come along. They packed medical supplies and hiking gear and drove out to where the horse had been spotted. The hike took almost an hour through thick forest and rocky terrain. When they finally found the horse, Maya's heart sank. It was a beautiful mare, probably about 5 years old, but she was badly tangled in old barbed wire and had several deep cuts on her legs and sides. She was weak from blood loss and clearly terrified. Oh my God, Lily whispered, all traces of her teenage attitude gone. She's beautiful. She's also very scared, Maya said, assessing the situation. This is going to take a while and it's going to be difficult. Maya began the slow process of approaching the horse and calming her down enough to begin treatment. Lily watched in fascination as Maya used her voice and gentle movements to gain the animal's trust. How do you know what to do? Lily asked softly. Experience, Maya said, carefully examining the horse's injuries. And patience. Scared animals need to know they can trust you before they'll let you help them. As Maya worked to free the horse from the wire and treat her wounds, Lily proved to be an invaluable assistant. She anticipated Maya's needs, handed her supplies without being asked, and most importantly, she stayed calm and quiet even when the situation became tense. The most difficult moment came when Maya realized that one of the horse's wounds was more serious than it had initially appeared. The mare had lost a lot of blood and was becoming weak and disoriented. Is she going to die? Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Maya admitted. We're going to do everything we can, but sometimes that's not enough. For the next 3 hours, they worked together to stabilize the horse and treat her injuries. Lily held pressure on wounds, mixed medications, and kept the horse calm with gentle words and soft touches. Maya watched in amazement as the sullen teenager transformed into a compassionate and capable assistant. Finally, as the sun was setting, the horse struggled to her feet. She was still weak, but she was stable and the bleeding had stopped. She's going to make it, Maya said with relief. Lily burst into tears. Hey, it's okay, Maya said, putting an arm around the girl's shoulders. She's going to be fine. It's not that, Lily sobbed. It's just, I've never done anything that mattered before. I've never helped save a life. Maya understood then that Lily's problem wasn't attitude or entitlement. She was a young woman who had never been given the chance to discover what she was capable of, who had never experienced the satisfaction of meaningful work. You were amazing today, Maya told her. You have a real gift with animals. Do you really think so? I know so. You have instincts that can't be taught. You knew what that horse needed before I even asked. From that day forward, Lily was a different person. She threw herself into the work at the clinic with genuine enthusiasm, asking questions and eager to learn everything Maya could teach her. The designer clothes were replaced with practical work clothes, and the sullen expression was replaced with curiosity and engagement. David noticed the change immediately when he came for his weekly visit. His daughter, who had barely spoken to him in months, was animated and talkative as she told him about the animals she had helped treat. Maya taught me how to give injections, Lily said excitedly, and yesterday I assisted with a surgery on a cat who had eaten a rubber ball. David looked at Maya with gratitude that went beyond words. Thank you, he said quietly when Lily went to show him around the clinic. I haven't seen her this happy in years. She's an amazing kid, Maya said. She just needed to find something she was passionate about. As the summer progressed, Maya found herself growing genuinely fond of Lily. The girl was intelligent and funny when she wasn't being defensive, and she had a natural way with animals that reminded Maya of herself at that age. More importantly, she was rebuilding her relationship with her father. David's weekly visits became the highlight of Lily's week. She would spend hours showing him what she had learned and telling him about the animals they had treated. David, for his part, seemed like a different person when he was with his daughter. The corporate executive disappeared, replaced by a proud and loving father. Maya watched their relationship heal and felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with her own feelings for David. Whatever happened between her and David, she had helped give him back his daughter, and that felt like the most important thing she had ever done. As August arrived and Lily's time in Pine Ridge drew to a close,